Welcome, London. Welcome back to my show. We are living in an epoch, in a time when the biggest news of last year, other than the pandemic, of course, was BLM, Black Lives Matter. My show is about multicultural Britain, multicultural London, and to me, that was a defining moment in our history in recent times. Today, my guest is someone who I feel is making a great progress and talking about some of the issues which affect us all. And she is at the forefront of change. We all must, if we can't adhere to it, we must at least give voice to it. And that's about unconscious bias. The way we have structured our society, it's not feasible anymore, it's not possible anymore that we live in silos. We are a global village. You like it or not, we are one world. We live in a global village. We work with people from different diaspora, culture, religions, and backgrounds. And in this moment in history, we don't have a choice but to understand each other better, to understand that we as a human race need to shed our biases and move forward if we want harmony, peace, and a collective movement in our lives. So friends, welcome my guest for today, Smita Tharoor. Smita, welcome to my show. Friends, before invite Smita, I'll just like to do a brief background. I'd just like to talk about her briefly. Smita Tharoor is a motivational speaker and a thought leader on the unconscious bias, as I said before. She's the co-founder of Culturelytics, which is a company that uses artificial intelligence to under culture as an organization, and the founder of Tharoor Associates, a training, coaching, and organizational development company. She has been doing a series of podcasts called Stories of Unconscious Bias. And the stories include a transgender man in New Zealand, someone with 4-stage cancer in New Delhi, a black man who's mistaken for white over the phone in London, a practicing Iranian Muslim sharing stories of Islam and jihad, or unconscious biases about the Kama Sutra, a gay dad in California, someone who lost 3 limbs in a landmine in Afghanistan, and a lot more. And these are stories of our times. These are stories which is about all of us. And she is now currently ranked among the top 5% of podcasts listened out of 1.8 million podcasts and is heard in 38 countries. So that's a long enough intro, Smita. I could go on because you have a lot of accomplishments and achievements. But obviously, as some of my viewers would know, you also carry a Tharoor surnames, and that's linked to Shashi Tharoor. So I don't know if you look at it as an achievement or as, I'm sure you're proud of your family and your background. So that's another thing which possibly in some small ways we'll explore in our show. And let me start the show with my first question to you, which is about the theory of unconscious bias. Your work has been phenomenal. I did listen to some of your podcasts. I do not get a lot of time, but I do think that your content is something very unique, and I would rate it highly. The only other person who I feel personally, has in some other ways through his books and through his work impacted this particular field is Malcolm Gladwell, and I would rank you very close to him in the kind of work you've been doing. So I believe that your work has now been recognized and it has an impact in how society is addressing unconscious bias. What do you think defines it? What is the philosophical discourse behind it? And how do you define it yourself?
Thank you. Firstly, thank you so much, Manish, for inviting me on your show. And thank you for listening to some of my podcasts. And Malcolm Gladwell, my God, I'm honored to be on the same page with him. So thank you very much. In answer to your question, When I think of unconscious bias and the philosophy of unconscious bias, it is very much about our humanity and how we all see the world in a very similar way, no matter where we live, how we grow up, and what our cultural influences are. So it's a simple answer, but it's also extremely important. It's multi-layered, and to me, the philosophy of unconscious bias is about acknowledging that our narrative, our lifestyles, our experiences all influence on how we see the world. That's how I understand unconscious bias.
Sure. So, what exactly, if somewhere to ask you in pure layman's terms, what exactly is unconscious bias? How would you define it? Uh, let's call it an elevator pitch. How would you define it in simplest terms?
Not even elevator pitch, just simple. So let's take the second word first. So the word bias, what does the word bias mean? The irony is a lot of people, when they hear the word bias, they think of it as something that is negative.
Sure.
Whereas the word bias is just a preference. Okay, I have a preference for or against X. It could be a country, it could be a person, it could be I like red, I have a bias for red, you don't have a bias for red. And then the word unconscious. So therefore, I react implicitly without my realizing it to a situation or to a person or to a country or to an object, whatever it might be. And I don't realize why I am. And that makes it an unconscious bias. But when you were asking me about the philosophy, it's directly linked to that. Because why is it that I'm unconscious? Why is it implicit? Why is it I don't know? And I don't know because I have not been reflecting enough to be aware that certain influences in my life have impacted on me to make that assumption. And in fact, just to expand on that, well, I'll give you a little story. Hello, I think I've lost you.
No, no, we can hear you, Smita. That's fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. I just wanted to share a little story with you to try and explain to you what I mean by the philosophy and the meaning of unconscious bias. So I was speaking at the conference in Philadelphia, and I was talking about unconscious bias, how we influence, and so on. And a lady or came up and spoke. And this will reflect a lot as well to people who live in joint families or in the UK, or what we call extended families in the West. So this lady of Italian lives in an extended family. In other words, uncles, aunts, grandparents, cousins all under one roof. And she grew up in a very patriarchal family. So much so that the women did not have a voice. And they were demeaned and they were not encouraged to have an opinion. So now she's in the office, in a team meeting, and she wants to say something, she wants to contribute. But what is her unconscious bias? That there's no point speaking up because I've always been asked. Does that make sense? So this is so much about me, my story, my narrative, which is how I get unconscious bias.
Sure. So I understand that and I get that, and I can see that you also are mindfulness practitioner. So I can join the dots. But my observation or other question would be, for instance, another story from my end, like my grandma, my maternal grandmother, who was a very loving person, very honest, full of integrity, but she had very strong biases. So this is she has passed away. She's no more. But in her time when she was alive, she would not, let's say, eat out of certain people's hands. Example, but then the person had a basic integrity, person had a basic uh, character which was true and honest. And my question would be that yes, what we're talking about uh, is right, absolutely right. I mean, there's no two ways about it, and one needs to reflect upon it. But in today's time, are we forcing people somewhere not to speak their mind and not to have that integrity? And we're creating something which is known as woke culture, woke activism, cancel culture. Do you think what you're talking about has some implication on that?
There are a couple of things going on here. Firstly, your grandmother was alone. There are many grandmothers like you,
Yeah,
all over the world.
yeah,
And it is very much about our cultural influence and our life experiences. And why is it that I am the experience? Because of what's been embedded in me. Your grandmother and how she was brought up, she would have been brought up with certain traditions, for
correct.
a better word. So you know, for example, you your hands, and you mustn't touch anything with your hand until you washed it after eating, and all kinds of different things. Caste that might be relevant, and
Absolutely.
religion that might
I didn't want to talk about
be.
it.
It
Yeah,
depends on
but exactly. Yeah.
it depends on how you're brought up and what's important to you. And your grandmother didn't question. So it was what I call embedded in her. Now fast forward to you. You heard your grandmother, but you've reflected on how she has represented herself and her beliefs, and you've made a decision not to follow herself. Why is that? You made a decision. There are a lot of people who do that. So that's a slightly different question to the one you're talking about, which is about woke culture. In my opinion, anyway, that's how. Because the business about seeing people who show bias in many ways, and they are of a different generation that we no longer do, it's because we've been self-reflective and we don't want to choose those particular traditions in inverted commas in our families. But when we talk about woke culture or cancel culture, or another word that's extremely useful is microaggression. That is something else, and that is very much about how is it that we understand unconscious bias. Now, since George Floyd trial, Black Lives Matter, as you correctly say, has taken on a different meaning. This is not the first time Black Lives Matter started. It started in 2013. In 2020, it went to another level. And a lot of people, black and white, or black and non-white, non-black, are asking what can we do to have a more inclusive culture. So the outcome of that is people are a little frightened to say things in case they're misunderstood. And my fear is that society is becoming more divisive. In the UK, in the US, because of woke culture, because of cancel culture, because of the word microaggression and other examples you can think of, rather than creating a more inclusive society, we are now having a more divisive society.
Sorry, what is the word you used? Smita, I didn't catch
People are trying to do the right thing. And that's the worry. I mean, for example, the word microaggression. Let's just make up a story. Let's just imagine that I meet somebody who has never been to India, doesn't know anything about India, meets me here on the streets of London. And I say, I'm from India. And they say, oh, really? You So, you know what Indian cooking? You do cook a lot of Indian curries.
Of course.
Now, my question to you would be, is that a microaggression or is that curiosity? If I took it as a microaggression and I said, why are you being so racist? We have now already started creating a divided society. If I replied and said, how come, why you just curious to know why you asked? And then that person said, oh, I love cooking and I'd like to learn how to cook. cook Indian food, X, Y, Z, it goes to a different level. So I think what we need to do is break this idea of trying too hard with woke culture, being frightened to say things when it's understood, and instead listen to people and have open, honest conversations with people.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good perspective because the onus is not just on a culture or a society. The onus is on both. We, if we define ourselves as, if we choose to define ourselves as minority or people from different culture, then it's also onus on us that how we kind of create.
But I'd say the onus is always on us. Me, myself, and I. That's number one priority. Whereas what's happening in your place, you.
So do you think from that perspective, BLM? Look, I mean, BLM is a very defining moment, but I'm not a big fan of the movement necessarily because I do see flaws in there because it's a lot of emphasis on being victims. So while it's very important that that issue got erupted and very timely and it had a global resonance, so that's correct. But then the victimhood part of it, I was not quite sure. What do you say to that?
No, I think it's brilliant that the BLM has taken on a new voice again since 2013. And I think specifically Black people, more than any other ethnicity, have suffered a lot, especially in the US,
Yeah.
but in the world over. World over. And so we need to acknowledge that. And we need to try and make a more inclusive society. But what I don't want about BLM is black versus white, or black versus right versus wrong. That is what's happening now. Instead, what we need to be saying is we acknowledge no matter what your ethnicity is, it could be religion, it could be gender, it could be sexuality, it could be all kinds of things. Difference, it could be disability. Because you are seen as somebody who is different, you may have been experiencing discrimination. But what are we going to do about it? How do we create a more inclusive society?
Sure. So that brings me to the obvious question: what do you think is happening in British society, and what impact in the post-Brexit Britain, this whole unconscious bias is going to have? Do you think that the British government, and I'm talking about the current government, which does not seem to be very favorably disposed to hard-hitting questions, naturally being a conservative government, they seem to be talking about economics and the trickle-down effect and being a bigger economic power. So it's those kind of primary objectives of the current governance seems to be. Do you think that they're going to understand what you're talking about and its importance?
That's the problem, you see. Because when people are talking about unconscious bias in the UK, a lot of people, not everyone, they're not speaking of it the way I'm speaking of it. They're saying right versus wrong. They're saying black versus white. And so, for example, the government was asked to do unconscious bias training, and they said it's a waste of time because what tends to happen is the people are put on the defensive during the training. Now, if I point a finger and say, Manish, how dare you? Your natural instinct would be to go on the defensive. Then you're not listening. And then if you're not listening, you're not going to be self-reflective and you're not going to make change. So what I'm saying is, let's take a step back. Let's not point fingers. Let's not say you have white, not you specifically, but I'm talking about the other word which you mentioned, which is white privilege. Let's not focus on these kind of words like woke, white privilege, and microaggression, and say you're white, and therefore you are privileged, and therefore you are wrong. Therefore, try and address what you did differently to avoid. Because what you're then doing is or making them feel on the defensive. So I think what I'm trying to say is the government and other people think about words like unconscious bias need to understand it's not about other people. It's about us and our stories and our self-reflection.
Sure. So, Smita, I know you're also a consultant and you do advise corporates on organizational behavior and culture. So, do you think you're taking your understanding and learnings forward? Are you doing anything? Are you kind of making into some kind of a toolkit or some kind of say training modules? Is there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. So what we've now done, as I mentioned in my introduction, my company has created an artificial intelligence platform that looks at culture. And so instead of just going in and offering unpersonalized training, what we're now doing is using this AI tool to genuinely find out what issues are in an organization. So, for example, Bradford Council wanted to create a stronger community. So we chose 5 organizations in Bradford that were serving the community. They used this artificial intelligence platform, this tool, and then we analyzed the answers. And we were able to get focused interventions on how we can support the employees to be more inclusive. So we took a step backwards and a step forwards. And the interventions are just going to begin next week, which will include unconscious bias, but it might be something about recruitment. It could be about emotional resilience, different aspects that we need to understand because of the AI. And so I find that by using AI alongside human contact and conversation, we actually get a more robust outcome.
And obviously, one can't emphasize enough that when we are working in a multicultural world where people from different races and cultures are part of an organizational kind of set culture, it becomes extremely important that they get aligned. And a very interesting quote which I read goes something like this: that culture, and this is in the context of organizational culture, can have strategy for breakfast. And I understand where that comes from.
Peter Drucker.
Peter Drucker, yeah, absolutely. So, Shrintha, what you're talking about, obviously we have biases. We can't deny that. We all have, at some level, something which has been triggered in us, or I would not say we have necessarily taken it from our surroundings, but possibly deeper than that, we have been kind of tuned in a certain way. So, for instance, as you know, a lot of Indians would be naturally more inclined towards accepting leadership, let's say, from someone who's white. Or to put it more crudely, I do see that there's a lot of attraction to someone who's white versus someone maybe a black person or a person who's possibly yellow in color. So there seems to be that kind of a bias. Do you think this is neurological or is it psychological? Because this doesn't necessarily seem to be a product of psychology. There seems to be something deeper here.
It is very deeply embedded. Very, very deeply embedded in the psyche of the. I mean, I'll give you a story. So my son, he's 22 now. When he was 9, he went with his university friend to India on holiday. This white English friend and my Indian son went to Agra to the Taj Mahal.
Yeah.
And Ashwin, my son, was very surprised to find that complete strangers were going to his friend Guy and saying, "Can you please pose with us for photographs in front of the Taj Mahal?" So, why is it that these Indian tourists were asking this young boy, for a white English boy, to be in their photograph? Guy is never going to see. Guy is this boy's name. He's never going to see those strangers. That photograph will be printed maybe on their wall in the house. What is that about? And this is how I see it. You don't have to agree with me. It is very deeply embedded in the culture of the way we think because of colonization. So we're talking about 1600 something, and the first 1614, I think, when the first British person, put his feet in the shores of India. And now we're in 2021. And over that period of time, for a generation, Indians have learned a way of behavior. And rather than take that apart, if I compare it to your grandmother, who learned to say and have to give examples, you chose not to follow them. Perhaps your mother or your father, I don't know, your grandmother, also chose not to follow them. But for some incredible reason, many generations down the line, we're talking about, I can't count from 1600 to today, people still think and make assumptions that the white person is better. And totally, I'm talking about only Indians, because that was the question you asked, and white folk.
You can say Asian, not necessarily Indian, but the entire subcontinent, I would say, Indians, Pakistanis, everyone. Smita, we're going to have a short break and we're going to come back on this question in a few minutes, in about a minute. Thank you so much. With us in the studio today, and we're talking about unconscious bias. So Smita, just taking over from where we left the last question, which was about the obsessive nature of South Asians, and I would not necessarily say it's Indians, but the entire subcontinent seems to be obsessed with a certain amount of whiteness or attraction or some level of recognition in terms of giving them preference or other skin colors. And
I mean, certainly I've read, when Indians from Gujarat went to East Africa and just caught them there, but they were indentured labor. So I'm talking about many hundreds of years ago. But when the Brits brought the Indians from Gujarat to Africa, they immediately created a hierarchical level. So, for example, the white flag is number one. Then you, the brown person from India, and then the local person from Uganda or Kenya or wherever. And so that was embedded in them. The I'm the boss, the white guy is the boss, and the black guy is not the boss. And that embedded in how they think about things. So that was at that time an unconscious bias. But if they're still behaving like that, then you have to question what that's about.
Yeah. So, I mean, my original question was that because it has gone down for so long, is it almost like become a neurological or physiological, or I don't know how you say it, rather than just...
Actually, no, it's a great question. Because when you're asking that question, I was thinking of Proust. Not that I've read all Proust's books, but if you think about the Madeline story, and just for the viewers, just to remind them. So this person goes to his grandmother or aunt, I can't remember. There's this little biscuit, a French biscuit called a Madeline. And he always had a lovely time at home. And every time he went, he got a Madeline. Now, fast forward, he's in his 40s, 50s, whatever. As soon as he's given a Madeline biscuit, he is immediately thinking of, if he's happy, his physiological and neurological reaction is kind of happiness because of his memories of when he used to eat the Madeline biscuit. So similarly, when we are told, they're habits, these things are what are habits. When we have been told for generations that this is bad and this is good, or that tastes lovely, the white man is boss, or whatever it might be. You can think of any kind of example. And we don't question. It then becomes part of just our DNA.
Sure.
It could be, right? I mean, it's just we can debate about these things.
Sure. So I mean, this is something which I always thought about, and I think I should just share as an observation if you want to comment on it. Like our gods, the Trill, what we call the triumvirate, like the three most important gods, which in the Hindu mythology, which is Shiva, Rama, and Krishna, and actually Shiva is supposed to be dark, if I'm not mistaken. He's supposed to be dark-skinned, but obviously in today's context, he's always shown as blue. Krishna is also shown as blue, but Rama, for some reason, is always shown as fairer skinned. So I don't know if that's something which is due to the colonial history or the imperialist past, or was it?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It doesn't have to be colonial history. I think that could be just among us South Asians in our own groups. It could be, I'm not saying that it isn't, but it's extremely prominent even today. Certainly, I happened to be 5 months last year when COVID started. I got locked down in Delhi for almost 5 months. And I'm reading the newspaper, and the Manish columns still talk about what's called fair, as in light skinned. And I happened to bank with a bank in India as well as the UK. And I remember getting the Indian bank, where there were pictures of five images. Student. Have I lost you? Are you here? I can't seem to see you. Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes, Smita, please carry on. Smita, we can hear you. Please carry on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, I think I briefly lost internet.
That's fine.
I was saying, in this particular bank, I'm talking about 2 years ago, there was a picture with 4 graphics on it. Student, salaried employee, entrepreneur, and homemaker. 3 of them were male, 1 was female. No marks for guessing.
Yeah, I think.
What was far more interesting is that the 3 men were my color skin.
Right.
The homemaker woman was white. And people don't know these things. Nandita Das, who I use in my podcast, talks about colorism. And it's not just in India. It happens in Nigeria. It happens in many countries around the world.
I think you should definitely write to the bank and.
I did. And in fact, at that time, the CEO of the bank was a woman. Less said, the better.
Okay. Right. So there you go. So somewhere it's institutionalized in our cultures. And
thank you. That's the word. Exactly.
I think we can't just fight it in the same way. I think there has to be a lot more to be done in different ways, and it's also the popular culture, which has a lot of onus, where a lot of work needs to be done to change this.
I think it's about us, Manish. We have to be brave. We have to address our own unconscious biases. I have it. You have it. The world, every one of us. Let's deal with our own selves first.
And you did talk about awareness. I think that helps definitely if people become aware, and we don't necessarily react to everyone, but we try and make them aware. And that brings me to the question about education in this country. A lot of people have pointed this out. It has been last year, it was also in the news that for whatever reasons, the imperialist past or the colonial past is never fully explored in the British education system. It's there in the universities if you want to go and study, but as part of a mandatory curriculum, which should be part of it because it's part of the history of this country, it's somehow missing from the curriculum in an obvious way. And considering that you have a huge population of people from the subcontinent living here, this makes it even a bit more eerie. What do you think, and what needs to change?
I completely agree with you. I think it's called selective amnesia, where they give me books in school. I mean, I have three sons who all went to school in this country, and they, at school level, none of them studied this. Nothing about what we call the history of colonization. Two out of my three sons studied history at university, and therefore learned much more than they chose to. And it's absolutely right. And what do I think about it? I think that what tends to happen with a human being or a country is we create our own reality to make us look good, to make us feel happy about ourselves. And Britain is not seeming to be able to acknowledge what its past is. There are other countries, Germany is a very fine example, who has acknowledged its past, who teaches the children from day one about its past, about the Holocaust and everything.
Okay,
Canada is another country.
I was not aware of
countries.
that. I was not aware of that. So,
Yes.
do they teach you about
There are
Holocaust?
many countries who do that. Britain chooses not to. But again, Black Lives Matter. I'm hoping the positive outcome from that will be that it will be addressed and children will be taught this at school.
So, Smita, Shashi Tharoor has written about the British colonial past, and he did make a very scathing criticism, I think one of the harshest possibly in recent times. But I do know another gentleman who's written about the imperial past, and the argument is that it was not so bad. For instance, the British in India did a lot of good things. For instance, it is commonly acknowledged that they revived some of the consciousness which helped in fighting ills like casteism or even things like the sati system and whatsoever. In fact, when they left India, they left it on a very friendly tone, with pomp and gaiety and cups of tea, as this writer would put it. So my question was about this, that this country in today's time also seems to be a favorite for people from the subcontinent. I mean, you and me live here, and not just us, there are a lot of people who aspire, and not just aspire, who actually live in both the countries. I mean, they find the British way of living a lot more fairer, the justice system and really democratic system really functioning, which possibly is a failure in the subcontinent. Do you think what we're talking about, I mean, we can accuse them of institutional racism, and it's not entirely untrue. Definitely, there are a lot of examples, and what they've done possibly in the past as well should be fully discussed and be in, like in the education system, it should be part of the curriculum. But do you think we're missing a point here? Do you think, I'm just taking this question into slightly different arena, which is also political.
So no, I get that. Yeah. I get that. No, that's fair enough. I think that institutional racism certainly did happen. And I would say that if you look at modern society today in the UK, you will find organizations like racism. So whether it's a country or an organization. But amongst that, there is also good. There were many wonderful, good English people, British people who went to India and did good for the country. And we can acknowledge them. But the larger picture was about destroying, about showing racism, about dividing and ruling, about acknowledging the caste system, and so on. That's what I personally believe. And obviously, I've read a few books, including my brother's. Um, so this idea of institutional racism did happen, but it needs to be addressed, and I think hopefully people are acknowledging that now.
Okay, and taking this discussion further into the corporate system, you know, how every board now is the new laws which are coming make it mandatory that every board should be representative. So they should have women on the board, they should have people from ethnic minorities on the board. And then we see some of the institutions like BBC, Sky, the media institutions, they are making it mandatory that 30% of the people, for instance, who are working in the field of documentaries should be from backgrounds, different backgrounds, from minority backgrounds. Do you think the change is coming? Do you see that happening?
I really, really hope so. Because if we don't have voices, then we don't have a genuinely inclusive organization. So if you're making a documentary and you're only getting 5 white people to come and talk about it, they will come with their story. It doesn't make it racist, that doesn't make it in any way negative. But they don't have the wisdom. Maybe you would bring into it. Or somebody else of another ethnicity would bring into it. And we're all Londoners, or we're all British people in this country together. And therefore, genuinely addressing and trying to give other voices the opportunity to hear, I think is an excellent thing to do.
Sure, and that obviously brings us into questions about things like gender bias, how the political system is running, not just here, but in many parts of the world, including India. Do you think these biases are being played at large? Like, for instance, in India, women in politics is still an exception, although there are a lot many more. There are a lot many more, but still an exception, and it's not necessarily people are, women being encouraged to enter politics. Forget women. I mean, to be honest, even the middle class sees politics as something which is either people of certain background of privilege or people from very, should I say, crook-like background. So it's like that kind of a dichotomy, that it's not seen as normal, well-educated people should enter into. And coming to Britain, politics obviously is still largely male-dominated. Where do you think, how can that change? Because that's very important to change, because if we really want representation, this needs to change. And where do you think your theory of unconscious bias is playing into in these
I think it
situations?
has to start at home. Empowerment of women has to start at home. And I'll give you an example. There was a study done in the US, probably 2 or 3 years ago, very recent, where they took a father of two little children, aged 2 and 4, one of each gender.
Mhm.
And the father was put to an audio recording for I don't remember the details, for a week or 10 days, to see how he communicated with children. It was a very small study, like 20 fathers. When they then analyzed the recording, all 20 fathers were communicating very differently with the girl than they were to the little boy. Doesn't matter about order of birth. So, for example, a little boy falls, the father will rub his knee and say, "Oh, get up and play." The little girl falls, he shows far more emotion and tenderness and encouragement of sharing emotion. And this is now, okay, this is modern day. This is our unconscious bias. Now, fast forward those children, and they are 35 or 45. Girls have a certain way of behaving, the expectation is like so, and boys' behavior is less so. So, what we need to, and that's just one little example I'm giving. So, what I'm trying to say is, parents, when we have children, boys or girls, it's about encouraging children to respect women and for the girls to have belief in themselves. No, and to say that you can be an astronaut, the prime minister of the country, you can do whatever you like. So it's about, if you have only boys, for example, you teach the boys to respect women. So when they go out in the world, they're able to actually acknowledge that having a woman as a boss is something we can learn. So it really has to start at home.
Sure. Smita, we got so much to talk about. I mean, I had prepared some questions, but I don't think we'll be able to cover all of them because we have paucity of time. Your work regarding unconscious bias opens up a lot of questions, and we can discuss various issues. But I would like to now come a bit more towards your personal life, towards you as a human being, and what you've been doing in other areas of your life. So, can I ask you a bit more about what interests you currently? I've seen you are one of the founding members of the Noor Inayat Ali Khan Foundation. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And I did attend it when you invited Arundhati Roy, who now the Indian government has almost portrayed as an enemy of the state. So would you like to talk a little bit about your other
Well,
role?
I'm very, very proud. Yeah, no, thank you. I'm proud to be a trustee of the foundation. The chair, Shavani Basu, who's written many books, and I think you had the pleasure of interviewing as well. She invited me to be a trustee. Noor Inayat Khan, known for peace, for non-violence, for religious harmony, for inclusion, for accepting of differences. Well, guess what? That's how I like to live my life. And to me, that was a very important aspect of wanting to do something with the Noor Inayat Khan Foundation. And yes, you're right, as part of keeping her name alive, having memorial lectures. We obviously taken a break because of COVID, but the last one was in 2019, I think, and Arundhati Roy, who spoke at our memorial lecture. I think she is wonderful because she also has the same values as Noor Inayat Khan. She thinks that religious harmony is important. She thinks that inclusion is important. She does not like division of caste or ethnicities or any of that. And that's what she believes in very, very strongly. So why is she hated in the Indian government? Well, I think rather than going into a political conversation, we can guess why. When you say things that other people don't like or might upset you or might ring certain bells that are completely accurate, then you're not liked. Yeah, I got to know Arundhati. She's brave, she's an activist, and she spoke brilliantly. Well, you were there in the audience.
Yeah. So definitely. So obviously, we are in living those times when the divisive and corrosive nature of politics seems to be dividing at all levels. And it never used to be so bad. It never used to be, at least in the fields of art, it used to be left untouched. But in today's time, unfortunately, it has seeped into every aspect of our life. Moving on, I mean, I did touch upon it that you have a Tharoor surname, and that is very well known to a lot of people from India and also people here. How does that play into your life, and how does I don't know? Do you grew up as siblings with Sashi? So how's that aspect of your life? Do you feel that there's a rivalry there, or you feel overshadowed in some ways because you're brilliant in your own way?
No. My name is Chandan Tharoor, my father. He
Okay,
gave me my name.
sure.
And sadly, he died very young. And we all adore him, really. So he is my hero, my father, whose surname I share. And I'm one of three. My brother, my sister, Shoma, who lives in California, and then I live in London. And the three of us are very, very close. No rivalry at all of any kind. And as we get older, as many of us know, that generation gap goes away, and we're now good friends. When we were little, he was my big brother, he was my hero, he could do no wrong. Whereas now we have a little sibling WhatsApp group, and we are open, we tell each other off. We ask each other for advice. It's a wonderful close connection, and we live in different continents, and it doesn't matter.
Sure.
And I feel proud of it. I am very, very proud of it. I'm proud to have that name. And he's taken that to another level.
So, Smita, so is London home for you now? Do you look at London as a home? And what's next? Are you working on something new? Other than your podcast, of course, are you working on a book? Are you doing something different? What are the plans for the future?
No, thank you for asking. First answer, the first question, is London home? Yes, London is definitely home. But I find that India is home. And for the first time in many, many years, we had 5 months last year when lockdown happened. And I was so happy. You don't realize it. So I have a leg in each head. Yes, I'm a Londoner, and yes, I'm Indian. And what's next for me? Well, podcast is keeping me very busy. I would like to write a book, but I have to make the time to write it. And then, of course, my consulting work. I work in different parts of the world, in the US, in India, in the UK. So, lots of things happening. Season 5 of my podcast will start in the next few weeks, where I've interviewed somebody in Pakistan, in Russia, people in the UK and London. Lots of different stories.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for being here. I'm truly honored to have you on my show, Smita. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I wish you all the best for all your future endeavors. Hope to see that book and that name a lot more in public consciousness. So good wishes for that, and hope to see you again very soon. Thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you so much, Manish. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.